I went off the grid to find peace. No phone, no people, just me and my German Shepherd at a remote hunting cabin. But something was already out there, not human, and far too smart to be just an animal. The fear I felt overseas hardly compares to what I experienced that weekend. I spent 6 years in the military working in canine explosive detection with my partner and best friend Pal, an 8-year-old German Shepherd. Adjusting to civilian life after my last tour wasn't easy. Having Pal with me helped, but I still needed a reset. I've lived in Michigan my whole life. Even before joining the military, I was no stranger to the outdoors. I grew up a bit of a loner. While the other kids played video games, I was heading out on 24-hour solo survival trips in the woods behind my parents' house, spending the night out there and trying to live with whatever I could catch. Anyway, a close friend I served with in Afghanistan heard I was having a rough time adjusting to civilian life and suggested I spend a week at his hunting cabin up north. He said it's exactly what helped him after his last deployment, just a little time off the grid to clear his head. Oh, and there's a big rotten branch hanging over the cabin that looks ready to come down, he told me. Take care of that thing for me, will ya? Needless to say, I didn't take long to take him up on his offer. It would also be Pal's first real break, his first time off duty. No more bomb sweeps or patrols, no more stress or danger, just a chance to be a regular dog for once, chase sticks, lie in the sun, and breathe easy. I'd read an article somewhere about how taking a break from technology can help reset your brain, so I left my phone behind. Not that I'd have any service out there anyway. Honestly, it was probably just saving myself from another hours-long Candy Crush spiral. No big loss there. I parked the car on the side of the trail, right at the marker my friend described. Pal jumped out as soon as I opened the door, full of energy. I grabbed my rucksack, my scoped .308, and we started the long hike north toward the cabin. The spot was extremely secluded, intentionally. My friend wanted a place that was completely off the radar, where there would be zero chance of running into anyone else. Given our shared military background, he didn't give me any directions, just coordinates. It was about a 6-hour hike through thick brush, no sign of a cleared trail, and that was fine by me. The sun was out, but with the heavy tree coverage, we barely saw it. Pal was right in his element. For the first hour or so of the hike, he stuck right by my side, glancing up at me every few seconds, alert, focused, and still in work mode. But after that, he started to relax. He'd wander further and further ahead to follow his nose, tail high, prancing over fallen trees and crashing through the underbrush. Well, I thought at least Pal wouldn't have any trouble adjusting to civilian life. Because of my time in the military, I was used to long treks through rough terrain. When you've spent enough time in that kind of environment, your senses sharpen. Not just your sight or hearing, but something deeper. You get in tune with your surroundings. Your gut becomes a tool, just like any other. I bring that up because during the last hour of the hike, I felt something. A familiar unease I'd only experienced a few times in the past. The kind of feeling that told me we weren't alone. I kept an eye on Pal, looking for any shift in his behavior, any sign that he sensed it too, but nothing. In fact, he seemed more carefree than ever, practically buzzing with joy. I chalked up the feeling to leftover tension from my last deployment, a false alarm, just ghosts in the nervous system, and pushed it out of my mind. Right around the 5-hour mark, we pushed through the last patch of thick brush and stepped into a small clearing. The cabin sat on maybe a 1/4 acre of land, surrounded by tall grass. 3 old lawn chairs circled a makeshift fire pit, the ring lined with small boulders. I could tell right away, no one had touched this place in months, but still, it was perfect. Quiet, empty, removed from everything, and exactly what I needed. The cabin itself sat raised about 2 feet off the ground on concrete pillars, probably to protect it from flooding during heavy rains. The exterior was finished in corrugated sheet metal, roof and all. I'm guessing leftovers from some other project. It wasn't pretty, but it did the job. Inside there was a single main room, maybe 90 square feet. In the center sat an old metal kitchen table with 4 mismatched chairs. Against the back wall, a homemade wooden bunk bed took up most of the space. Just above the lower bunk was a small window, maybe 2 by 2 feet, positioned so it would sit directly behind your head while laying down. At the opposite end of the cabin, there was a tiny room with a built-in wooden bench. A hole had been cut through it, straight to the ground below, covered by a toilet seat. My friend had explained it was mostly for emergencies in the winter, when it was too cold to go outside and dig a hole. Personally, I figured I'd be better off doing my business in the woods. After I dropped off my bag and fed Pal, I stepped outside to explore a bit. Behind the cabin, I found a makeshift shower, basically just a black tarp loosely tied over 4 trees with a plastic spout in the middle. I spent the next 3 hours hauling buckets of water from the river and dumping them into the tarp. Not long after the sun dipped below the horizon, Pal and I were both ready to crash. The next morning, I woke up around 6 a.m. to the sunlight pouring through the window just above my head. Pal was already up, his head up, mouth slightly open, and staring at me. We headed outside and I made my way around the cabin to the shower, planning to grab some water for tea and maybe get a quick rinse. But when I got there, I was stunned to find the water was gone. The tarp had been ripped. Cut, really, corner to corner. Confused, I stepped closer to inspect it. That's when it clicked. Maybe the tarp was old, weakened from the constant sun exposure. Maybe the weight of the water had caused it to tear like that. Anyone who's ever used a tarp knows that when they typically rip in straight lines, following the weave of the material. Not too weird? I brushed it off pretty quickly. After all, the river was only about 200 feet through the woods, directly behind the cabin. I decided to spend the rest of the day chopping fallen branches around the tree line to make some firewood. The sun beat down relentlessly as I worked, but for the first time in months, maybe even years, I felt free. Free from my own mind, free from society, and the constant baseline anxiety I'd been carrying since returning home from overseas. It was an incredible feeling, and I couldn't have been happier. Pal had found a new favorite spot, laying in the cool dirt under the cabin, out of the direct sunlight. He stayed there most of the afternoon, alternating between sleeping and watching me work. I started a small fire to burn some of the smaller brush, figuring at the least I could do was leave the place in better condition than it was when I arrived. The afternoon turned into evening as I kept chopping, taking short breaks to get water for both Pal and myself. I was so caught up in the rhythm of it all that I lost track of the time. Then, just as soon as I finished my last chop, a blood-curdling scream rang out from the woods, slicing through the air and tearing apart my peaceful mindset to shreds. It was Pal. Every dog owner dreads that sound. That high-pitched, desperate yelp. Without thinking, I dropped the axe and sprinted toward the noise, but stopped only a few steps in. I turned and looked back, and to my confusion and relief, there was Pal. He had clearly heard the scream too, but he was standing near the cabin, just getting up from his spot under the building. I stood there, confused, wondering what could have made that sound. Having grown up in the area, I knew the native animals and their calls. That scream didn't sound like a coyote. Maybe it was a wolf, I thought. But then again, the same scream, piercing, high-pitched, almost identical to Pal's yelp. A chill ran down my spine. I know it sounds crazy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was making that sound was trying to lure us into the woods. There was no one around for miles. The closest human was at least 10 miles away, and although I suppose it could have been a wolf, there was zero chance it was another domesticated dog. The sun had just set, and feeling a bit disturbed, I decided to take Pal inside for some dinner. I left the fire going just in case I felt like going back outside to sit by it later. Plus, with the window by the bed, I'd be able to keep an eye on it, so I wasn't too worried. After we ate, I laid on the bottom bunk reading my book with a flashlight. My mind kept circling back to that strange sound from earlier. What could it have been? The more I thought about it, the more out of place it seemed, and the more I questioned myself. At some point I must have dozed off, because I was jolted awake by a horrible, shrill scraping noise from against the cabin. Loud, like metal dragging on metal. My heart slammed in my chest and I froze, barely breathing. Pal was already on alert, his body tense, ears forward. When he sensed danger, it was like flipping a switch. All focus, all readiness for whatever came next. I sat up in bed, eyes darting toward the window, scanning the dark clearing outside. The fire had burned low, casting just enough light to stretch shadows across the yard. I tried to reason it out. Maybe I missed a branch, but I'd cleared the area thoroughly. Could it have been a raccoon? Maybe it had climbed up and slid down the wall. I cupped my hands around my face, leaning closer to the glass, trying to cut the reflection and see past the glow. But the night pressed in, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there watching back. I laid down quietly, motioning for Pal to do the same. He lowered himself slowly, ears still perked, eyes locked on the door. I stared at the square patch of flickering firelight on the opposite wall cast through the window behind me. It danced and shifted like usual, until it didn't. For a split second the light bent, stretched, warped, like something had moved through it, and then, just for a moment, a shadow blocked it out entirely. My heart stopped. Someone, or something, was standing just outside of the window. The shadow adjusted again, and now I could make out the shape of a head and shoulders peering through. The most terrifying of all, however, was the size this thing had to be in order to see through that window. I mean, the cabin was raised 2 feet off the ground. The window was at least 4 feet from the floor, and this thing cleared the window ledge with its shoulders by at least 2 feet. Before I could turn around, the shadow darted down, quickly and intentionally, completely disappearing. I pressed my face toward the window again, but nothing. The same blackness as before. My heart pounded as time seemed to slow, adrenaline surging warm through my veins, that old familiar rush. Almost at the exact moment, I heard fast, heavy scurrying underneath the cabin. Whatever it was moving with purpose, straight toward the far end where the makeshift toilet was. I grabbed my rifle from the screw on the wall beside me and moved with it, trying to stay light on the floorboards as I tracked the sound. It stopped directly beneath the toilet. My finger hovered on the trigger, but I held back. I really didn't want to fire inside the cabin unless I had no other choice. And still, I had no idea what I was dealing with. What if it was human? Some massive 8-foot hermit just looking for food? That's all I needed. Ex-military guy with PTSD shoots peaceful forest wizard in outhouse incident. Suddenly, banging and scratching erupted from the bench where the toilet seat was mounted. My panic spiked. Whatever this thing was, it was actively trying to get in. Not randomly crawling, but testing, looking for weak spots, checking for entry points, systematically. Still not ready to fire, I stomped hard on the floorboards. The second I did, Pal exploded, barking, growling, teeth bared, fully locked in. It actually startled me. I hadn't seen him like this since we came back from overseas. Almost instantly, the scurrying shot out from under the cabin, fast and heavy. That was it. Fight mode kicked in. I grabbed the door handle and threw it open, rifle up and Pal by my side. We stepped out together, still in the doorway, scanning the dark clearing for movement. And in case it's not obvious, Pal is trained. He will not break my side unless I give him the word. I tried to focus my gaze, forcing my eyes to adjust to the darkness. The fire was barely aglow now, just enough to carve out faint outlines into the trees. Then Pal started up again, barking hard, deeper and more aggressive than before. His whole body low, teeth bared, locked onto something dead ahead. I narrowed my eyes, straining to follow his line of sight, and that's when I saw it. Just at the edge of the fire's dying light, something moved. Long, thin legs slowly came into view, impossibly long and bending at strange, unnatural angles. They were pale, nearly bone white, and hairless, like skin stretched too tight over a frame. It moved low to the ground, not quite crawling, not quite walking. As more of it came into view, I saw a hunched, contorted torso, ribs pressing against the skin with very slow, shallow breath. And then its head. It was elongated and smooth, with no visible ears. Its mouth was thin and wide, and it hung open maybe an inch. But the eyes, they were the worst. Large, sunken, and completely black. No light reflected in them, not even from the fire. They looked more like holes than eyes, like it had nothing human behind it. I don't know how to describe this, but honestly, the thing didn't even look alive. It looked more like an animatronic or something. Or maybe that's the only way my brain could process this thing. Honestly, if someone had told me it was a statue, a creepy giant Halloween prop, I probably would have believed them. It wasn't hiding anymore. It stood there, low and still, just watching us. Not afraid, not curious, but calculating. In that moment I knew this thing wasn't some freak of nature. It was smart, and it had been planning something from the second we arrived. Almost instantly I raised my rifle and fired, one clean shot. The sound it made I'll never forget. A deafening screech, not like anything I'd ever heard in my life. Higher than a human scream, louder than any animal I'd encountered, and so piercing it felt like it rattled the inside of my skull. If I hadn't been there, I wouldn't have believed that sound was even possible. The thing dropped hard onto its back, then twisted violently, flipping over and trying to scurry toward the tree line. But it was injured, bad. Its limbs flailed in all directions, moving fast but not in sync, like it didn't know how to control them anymore. It wasn't crawling so much as dragging itself forward, spindly arms clawing at the dirt in panic. It was fast, but not as fast as it wanted to be, and for the first time, I could tell it was afraid. I stood there, jaw nearly on the floor, heart pounding in my ears as the sharp scent of gunpowder hung in the air. Pal was still by my side, absolutely losing it, barking, snarling, and ready to chase. I could tell it was taking everything in him not to take off after that thing. Obviously, neither of us slept that night. We stayed low and silent, ears tuned in for the slightest sound. Another scream, another scrape against the cabin wall. Anything that would have told us it was out there. But the woods stayed quiet. The moment the sun cleared the tree line, we were gone. As we passed the spot where I hit it, I expected something. Blood, a trail, a smear in the dirt. But there was nothing, not a single sign. And honestly, that made it worse. I know I hit it. I know it was injured. But how badly? I don't know of any animal that could survive a shot like that. From a .308 rifle, it's just not possible. But I'll tell you this. I won't be spending another night in that cabin. Hey everyone, apologies for the audio in this video. I do have a cold right now, so hopefully it didn't ruin the entire thing. Anyway, if you liked the video, please like and subscribe. It really makes a huge difference, especially when the channel's this small, and I appreciate everyone that watches. Alright, see you next time.